All right, and we're live, Oliver. So, really excited for this week's edition of Ecom Weekly Live. We have a really special guest, Oliver Blackshaw from Breakthrough Creatives. Um, Oliver obviously runs a creative agency. I'll give him a second to introduce himself. But thank you, everybody who's tuned in to Ecom Weekly Live, who's watching the recording of this, etc. This is a weekly show put on by myself at Aplo Group. We're a direct consumer growth firm that works specifically with direct consumer brands. And we essentially want to have conversations on a weekly basis with owners, operators, agency owners, et cetera, in the D2C space that can bring different perspectives into what they're doing and what they're seeing work in their line of work. So, Oliver, I'll hand it over to yourself quickly. I know you probably want to give a much better intro than I did of yourself and kind of your background and what Breakthrough Creatives is, and then maybe set the foundation for what we're going to talk about, and then we can dive right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, we're Breakthrough Creatives, and we really primarily focus on net new human forward kind of creative for brands. That's really our kind of key, specifically D2C brands is really what we look at. Performance creative. So measuring performance and how we can help unlock scale for brands really is the key, but really kind of in the era that we're in now with where we find people being a bit more sensitive to creative, how can we think about being more sophisticated and bringing that authenticity and creativity as well to the brands that we work with as well. That's one of the kind of the biggest things that we really do. And really the focus for what we're going to go through today is kind of our approach to creative strategy and how we kind of work through the process to set ourselves up for success. That is really the kind of the core focus of what we want to go through today, to kind of dive into that system a little bit. And it's also one of those things with the system is that I also think that it's not something that you necessarily have to stick to specifically like each individual step. It really depends where a brand is at. And I'll kind of add that in as we're going through to it. But I think is using it as a foundation is really useful to help you kind of see maybe where the gaps are with what maybe brands are currently doing when it comes to creative strategy.
For sure. Yeah. And I think obviously you guys can see the title of the conversation today, why most brands fail at creative strategy and the system to use instead. Why I'm really excited for this conversation too, and your perspective on it all, Oliver. Obviously we collaborate on a few brands together too, and have nothing but great things to say about the creative you guys make. But I think what's really important now is the input is so important in creative, especially if you're leveraging AI tools or whatever your workflows are. And obviously we'll get into good workflows today for that, but the input is so crucial to actually maximize the output. Like we're in an age where you have the ability to just 100x output if you really wanted to. But what really matters is obviously the input into doing that. And that's also the differentiating factor between yourself and another brand is the actual input that's going into these tools and these systems. So creative strategy, incredibly important. And yeah, we'll dive right into it, Oliver. So please feel free to take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just click this. There we go. Yeah, so pretty much what it said previously. Stop making great ads. Why most brands fail at creative strategy in the system that we use instead. And really the big thing is that when we look at ads when we come into a brand and we look at maybe what they're doing, or if a brand is really struggling, I always say to brands that it's never really a creative problem. Like ideas and creativity isn't necessarily lacking in a brand's account, but it's more about the system that they're going through that process and how are they actually getting to that end goal in terms of, okay, why should we be utilizing this creative? That's really the biggest thing here is that being able to kind of connect the dots backwards and understand, okay, why are we doing this? And why is it important for us to be doing this specifically? Because that's what's really going to help us moving forward. And I think the problem is there's sometimes that disconnect with brands where they're like, oh, like we need to get new creative into the account. And sometimes that thinking kind of falters a little bit, really is the biggest thing. So we're kind of going to go through basically just some failures that I see on a regular basis and what I think is, how we approach it and how that kind of that shift in perspective is really going to help. So the biggest thing, like number one, you just mentioned this about utilizing AI, only using your own customer reviews. Hey, GPT, Claude, like analyze my reviews. Great. That's it. Creative strategy. Wow, it's super easy. It's a good starting point. That's the biggest thing. But one of the things when we're looking at reviews, and especially customer reviews, and it depends at the different levels that brands are at. But one of the things that we always see is that when you are just solely focused on your own reviews, there is an element of you're kind of living in your own brand's bubble. Like the reviews that people are leaving for your brand, they're saying not necessarily always great things. Maybe they have some criticisms, but there's always, I think, a little bit of a bubble with that. So what we want to kind of think about is like, how do we break out of that? And what is the opportunities for us to be able to do that? And more importantly, what is the process to go about doing that? So really the fix to that is kind of collecting sentiments across multiple data points. So I already just said this, but the brand data is slightly skewed. And especially if you are maybe struggling as a brand to break out of what you're currently doing, and you're like, okay, like we've tried lots of different angles, like we're really stuck with where we need to be going. Most of the insights that you're potentially like just not able to catch are just outside of that bubble that you're utilizing. So what we want to be thinking about is building that better view of your market. So how we want to be thinking about this is with this spreadsheet, this is more of a kind of utilizing reference numbers and sources to kind of give us an understanding of like, what is the actual sentiment across the whole marketplace for this brand. So with this, we're thinking about looking at pulling the reviews from the brand's, the brand's pages, if it's a specific product, or just reviews in general, but also social listening. Reddit obviously is such a valuable tool, pulling social listening, and then also competitors as well to get an understanding, because there's potentially stuff with competitors that is maybe something that's not working for those customers that are buying from the competitor, that actually maybe the brand's unique mechanism is a better solution for that, but maybe they don't necessarily know that, or maybe that's not something that they know that they should be kind of speaking to more than anything.
Yeah,
so
I think it's a great thing, Oliver, because the social listening side is really interesting too. I've been playing around that personally on mine for the last little bit too, and being able to almost like monitor competitors or similar people in your space or industry, et cetera, and what's kind of happening on forums with respects to their product, their brand, or whatever they're pushing is a really good way to kind of like spy on what the chatter is around the competitors, and how do you apply that information to maybe what you're doing well or what you're not doing well on your end from a creative standpoint. It's cool. I think 100%. A lot of people don't leverage that. Yeah,
exactly. And I think also as well with this is that when you're looking at kind of collecting sentiments, I always think that it's something that you should also limit as well in terms of how many. Like with this spreadsheet, I think that realistically you want to be thinking about kind of 150, 160, maybe 200 max across the different areas, your own reviews, social listening, competitors, to kind of give you a bit of like a good starting point. Because I think the problem is sometimes when you have like 10,000 reviews, it's like, it's just so much data. Whereas like, it's better if you're kind of going into it, okay, we're going to take maybe 30 or 50 of the most current reviews for the brand, and then we're going to pull the most relevant Reddit posts for that relate to the brand itself, and then we're going to pull maybe 20 reviews from maybe two of maybe two direct competitors, and maybe some reviews from an indirect competitor as well. That's how I want to think we do it, because there is just so much data out there now. Like you could get so much, and sometimes it's better to just limit a little bit of what you want to be collecting, just to give you a bit more direction. AI is wonderful. We love AI. AI is great. It really is good at digesting all of the information. But I think one of the things that we have to be really careful of, and again we see this all the time, is just trusting AI blindly and being like, oh, okay, like if AI has told me that is the analysis of the sentiments, for example, then it must be true. And one of the issues there is like, okay, but how do you double check that? Because AI is fantastic at helping streamline the workflow for us. But then we also want to figure out what are the triggers and the ways that we can help. What are the ways that we can kind of help backtrack and make sure that we can double check our work? That's something that I think is really important. So when we're thinking about this and we're pulling, similar to what we mentioned in the kind of, failure one, fix one, is utilizing AI to analyze reviews. I think, yes, is a great starting point. You want to do that to understand your core customer base as well. But then when you're looking at the sentiments, I think that one of the important things is looking at, and I've kind of highlighted it in this as well, is that, and this is the importance of having the sentiments numbered, because it kind of gets you to be able to kind of double check your work. And that is really the most important thing, is that, for example, when we're pulling these sentiments, and for this brand, it's saying one of the pain points is, the top one is shin splints during training, especially for beginners and new runners, very common. But it also is tagging 51, 52, 53, 54, all the way up So it's giving us a clear understanding of like, oh, okay, so then if we go back, if I just quickly switch back here, for example, we go back to this spreadsheet, you can then look at it and go, oh, okay, cool. I can then look at that review or that Reddit post, and that will potentially, then you can then dive that layer deeper, but it is in a way that is more focused as well. And I think that's really the important thing is it's able to kind of, when you're double checking your work and being able to validate what these sentiments are saying, rather than just being like, okay, AI has told me this is the main problem, because we all know that it can make mistakes. Like they say it for a reason, and you push back on it and then it will say, oh no, you're right. So like being able to kind of double check your work, I think is really important as well. And I think kind of when we think about it, raw data, it's just a lot of noise, but then that volume is going to create the signal. But what we really want to use with all of that volume and signal is kind of being able to understand what the patterns are, because that really creates the truth for us when we're thinking about the actual customer itself. And also as well, one review is not an opinion. Like that's not something, one review is an opinion, patterns are truth. Like one review doesn't mean anything. Like if we've seen it when we've come into brands and it's like, a whole concept is built off of one really, really niche specific review. And it's like, yeah, okay, this is good in theory and it's very specific, but it's the TAM is this big. And then like this review has gone for like this really, really small niche, tiny customer. And it's like, yeah, it is really specific, but it's a little bit too specific. So when it comes to creative strategy, there has to be that element of like understanding of like, okay, am I trying to be too sophisticated here? Am I getting in my own way? Do we need to take a step back and broaden our horizons and like broaden who we're speaking to a little bit potentially? So that's kind of the back and forth that you have to think about when it comes to kind of creative strategy and when you're looking at this data as well. Fairly 3, basic avatars with no real depth. I think that, again, it's something that is a good starting point, but I always think that when we kind of share like onboarding questionnaires with brands, and sometimes we'll get, responses back. It's like, oh, women between 35 and 60 that have this problem. It's like, okay, that is in quotes an avatar, but what we want to do isn't, that's why we do what we do is that we want to go that layer deeper. We want to come at it and go, okay, that's great, but let's utilize the sentiments, let's analyze them, and let's then move forward and build a more in-depth avatar that gives us a clear understanding, because what we can then do with that is build out a much more comprehensive approach, basically. And that's really what we're wanting to be doing, is that a lot of the time when people are sharing avatar information, it's more of just a demographic versus an actual avatar. So really what we want to be thinking about with this is a couple of different areas. We've got 2 slides for this one. So avatar name, just giving them a simple name, whatever it is, the burn repeater, skeptical first time switcher, whatever, whatever it is that you think is right, or, utilizing Claude to be able to kind of give you that direction. But then diving into, rather than it just being an age and a person that their problem is, what is their actual situation, what's going on in their life or the buying journey at this exact moment. Because we also, one of the things that we always find, and I have to do this myself, I have to kind of re-gut check myself and think about it, is that there's people at the end of this, at the end of the phone that are scrolling, that are seeing this video or seeing this static, and what are they thinking? What is their life like? What are they going for? Because that is something that I think is super, super important, because there's some brands where the customers are maybe a bit more sensitive, to, they're in a situation, maybe they are feeling a bit, a bit down, like they're maybe losing hope about, maybe a specific problem they're dealing with. Maybe that type of customer, based on their situation, we probably won't necessarily want to talk to them in a more fear-based way. We want to be actually thinking more about, okay, we probably want to speak to them more around something that's a bit more optimistic, messaging as well, and being a little bit more sensitive to their situation. And that's why I think it's important to kind of build this out, because it gives us an understanding of what is their situation, but then also what are they trying to solve? Like, what are the decisions or problems that they're consciously trying to resolve in their lives? And then leaning into like the emotional states. Like, what are those dominant emotions in their lives at the moment? Is it, for example, frustration around maybe not being able to run a certain amount without their calf giving in? Or is it that they are, for example, they've taken their second or like third medication, it's not working, they are in a position where like they're super anxious and they're just like they really are just kind of reluctant for any other solution. So how we think about how we're approaching these customers is very different. Obviously they're different brands, but that's what we want to be thinking about. But then also understanding market sophistication. And there's a lot of, I think that a lot of people do talk about market awareness, like, okay, where are they at from like the awareness level? But I think market sophistication is something that not necessarily gets forgotten about too much, but it's something that I think some brands and avatars of those brands really need to be taken into consideration. Because if a brand is, for example, nurses that wear compression socks, like nurses are not like, the sophistication is the highest level of sophistication for the majority of nurses that are wearing compression socks, for example, because they have colleagues that are probably wearing them. They also deal with them on a daily basis. They probably don't necessarily need like the education and understanding of why these products are like why this is a benefit to them. It's more about okay, we need to be speaking to them differently, and that's kind of how we want to like link market sophistication and awareness level together, because that is, I think, an important standpoint. Because some people, some brands or even specific avatars, like they can sit in different sophistication levels in the market. And then there's no point in trying to speak to someone in like the highest market sophistication who's like problem aware, because it's there's just a mismatch in messaging.
Yeah, and I think like a good way to frame it too, that actually a member of our creative team is often mentioned, is like a good ad should not resonate with everybody. It should resonate with like specific people. Like it should actually probably not resonate with most people, right? Like most people 100%. Are probably not going to resonate with it, but if you're building it right, there's going to be, that avatar you're going after that actually resonates really well with it. And the goal isn't to have it resonate with everybody, especially in the world of direct response and where we really live on the D2C side.
100% it is. It's there's like a phrase is like, it's if an ad speaks to everyone, it speaks to no one, doesn't it? That sort of
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, it's exactly super important when it comes to that. And then also the primary friction, like what is stopping their action? What is actually stopping them from making this purchase? Is it that they have been burnt before with other products, so they may be a bit more skeptical? I think really trying to understand that, and then building out that then 1 to 2 sentences. So this is really for the strategist to be able to like articulate that in a very short, just a short sentence. And I think that's something that is good to kind of continually reiterate when you're thinking about creative strategy and coming back to it, because a lot of this stuff is you want to do this at the start, and then from there you want to kind of come back to it, but again, it gives you the direction that you want to go in for a quarter, for example. But then what we want to be thinking about is, just diving again, when we're building out the avatar, doc itself, one of the things we want to be doing as that like next layer deeper is just, okay, we understand that, their situation, what they're trying to solve, their primary frictions. We understand all of this, but we also want to understand, okay, what are their beliefs? And I think the important thing to think about here as well is that when we're building out these beliefs, again, using AI to be able to kind of streamline this workflow and help give you the direction. But I think the biggest thing here is that when we have the numbers next to them as well in terms of the supporting sentiments. And again, it's all this thing where we can kind of connect, like you just connect the dots backwards, so we can then always go back to where we started. Where does this data come from as well? So, belief 1, heavy sore legs after long runs are inevitable, but recovery shouldn't take days. That's a belief they have. So the supporting sentiments, we have these reference. These are, the actual quotes that have been pulled from, whether that is reviews from the brand, social listening, so that we can always double check our work. So we can go like, okay, is AI telling us the truth here? Yes or no? And that's kind of how we want to be thinking about it. And then taking that and then mapping that into the core selling strategy. It's like, okay, how do we want to be speaking to this particular avatar? What is it? So for this one, it's like, okay, we want to lead with faster recovery. And there's also that option to lean into the shin splint protection as well. How do we want to think about that? That's something we want to think about. And then maybe what are the possible winning angles off the back of that to give us that starting point? Waking up with fresh legs, not lead legs. Something that, runners that are, running X amount of miles a week, that is something that they're dealing with as well. Recovery overnight, run again tomorrow. That consistency of being able to stay within their training block as well with this product. So that's something, again, that we want to be thinking about. So that's kind of how we then build out that kind of core understanding of who this customer is, what are their beliefs, what is the core selling strategy. And that gives us basically the starting point. Test random ideas. There is I think we've definitely moved, kind of course corrected a little bit as well more recently. Definitely in the past like 6 months or so. I think there's a lot of conversations probably back end of last year, early this year, around like just, creative volume. And I think there's that. It's not something that we ever do, just because of the amount of the work it takes to be able to work with the creators. But it's one of those things where it's like more ads isn't always the answer. Like it's not just, oh, okay, we just need to get more ads. It's like, okay, no, what we want to be thinking about is we want to actually build out a system where we can understand what we're testing and why. And I think the problem is volume can work at scale, but I think having the systems in place is really the important thing. That is really the kind of the core crux of it, is that, yeah, you can do volume, but you don't want to compromise strategy for volume. That is really
I think that goes back to like the whole input and how important that is, because obviously like you have tools and systems that can really accelerate output and just make it allow you to produce way more than you ever could. But ultimately, if that's being done without the proper system and input, you're basically just producing a bunch of slop, and that's obviously not going to be beneficial in any regard. So totally agree on that. Like, exactly.
And then it makes you feel, it kind of makes you feel that you've done a lot. Like it's like, oh, like it took me 20 minutes and I pumped out like 50 ads. It's like, yes, okay, yeah, in theory, that's good, but actually, how effective are they going to be as well? But if you tie in this, if you tie in a solid system with that volume output, yes, like there's definitely that opportunity for sure.
100%. Yeah.
But then what we want to be thinking about is really for this is, building out this hypothesis system where we can, again, always be able to map it back. So we've used the sentiments, and then we've kind of got to the point where we've got the beliefs. And then what we want to go is, okay, like, what is the hypothesis here? Like, why should the, this improved conversion rate or CPA? Like, how are we going to do this? Like, okay, well, we know that their belief is heavier saw legs after long run are inevitable. Okay, so if we show real runners going from I've got my legs are like lead to my legs feel brand new overnight, that type of situation, because we know the product and the unique mechanism of the product enables the increased blood flow for the runners to be able to kind of have better overall recovery, then conversion rate is going to increase, because the people that are dealing with this, they can recognize that their exact experience. And then we can then tie that then to a specific angle. Okay, what is the angle that we want to focus on with this? Overnight recovery, not multi-day recovery. Okay, and what is the possible format that we want to do? For this one, okay, we probably want more of like a yapper testimonial style. It's a runner that's creating, he's a runner creator that leads with skepticism. And I think that's also one of the biggest things is thinking, and we'll get to this in some of the kind of the creative examples as well, but it's like trying, ensuring that you add as much context as possible. Customers are just so sophisticated now, like they can just tell, like they can just tell what, when an ad's trying to be an ad, or if an ad's trying to be authentic but it's just inauthentic. It kind of really struggles with that. It struggles to connect with the with the audience as well. So that's kind of where we want to start and think about, okay, now we have this belief, what are we testing and why, and what does that angle look like? Okay, now what does that format look like? And then we've kind of got a clear understanding of like, okay, we know why we're doing this now, rather than it being, hey, we're going to we're going to launch all of these ads and we're going to speak to, we're going to speak to runners. And it's like, okay, that's broad. It's just like super high volume. Whereas like, okay, if you did, stripped it back and said, okay, we're only going to do, even if it was just statics, for example, it's like, we're only going to run, 2 or 3, static concepts. They're all going to sit under this angle, but they're going to have different entry points, in terms of how they want to speak. Maybe one's more social proof focused, one is more outcome driven, and maybe one is more pain point focused. That would be a better overall starting point versus just kind of like just going gun ho. Operating week to week, I think that again, it's planning out the creative roadmap it's one of these things where it is a lot of effort up front, but it pays dividends. But it does feel like what you want to do is you just want to start to like we just want to like just keep running ads, like keep launching new ads, getting more ads into the ad account, and that's going to help the overall account. But sometimes I think it is worth, especially when it comes to brands, like taking that step back and going, okay, like we've done all of this research work, we've got to this point where we understand what the customer is. We have their beliefs, the hypothesis, we have these angles and these formats. Now, what do we want to be doing? that kind of leads us into like building a roadmap and then sticking to it. I think that's the important thing is being able to go, okay, like what is the high level creative plan here that we want to be focusing on, to ensure that we can continually look back and be like, okay, this was our creative focus for this month. Did we do that? Did we focus on that? What did we learn? So that you can kind of continually build on top of that. So looking at splitting it, when this is at least how we look at approaching it when we work with brands, is like, okay, what is working in the account at the moment? What angles are winning? What avatar is working well? Where are we seeing traction? Okay, let's go in there and let's increase format diversity on those proven angles, because the majority of the time there is an element of sophistication in the creative that these brands are running, that we're working with, and it's like, well, it's more about looking at and going, okay, from a creative lens, how do we go about doing different ways to speak about that? So mapping that out, and then also finding new winners, like bringing is it bigger swing ideas into the account, or testing higher potential angles and newer angles, or avatars if we think it makes sense as well. And I think that is something that you always want to kind of reassess, and then it's work happens and things get busy, and it's one of those things that it's not a perfect system and a perfect process that everyone sticks to at all times, but it's being aware of that system more than anything, and being able to kind of continually come back and be like, oh, okay, like let's just check in where we were, like what our roadmap actually is. Are we over indexing in one avatar, or are we trying to spread ourselves too thin across? Are we trying to speak to 4 avatars, and in those 4 avatars we're trying to speak to 3 sub avatars of each of them? And then it's like, oh, actually then it's suddenly the actual creative output has just suddenly been diluted as well. So I think that's one of the good things about having that roadmap and constantly kind of gut checking yourself of like, okay, what are we supposed to be testing, or what do we think we need to be testing, and at least having that plan, but also sticking to it to a point. Like if it makes sense to kind of move away, but like, actually this isn't working, like we don't need to be doing
you gotta have flexibility.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's that flexibility. So then we kind of this is probably the part that I like the most, purely because it's purely from a creative standpoint, is that you get all the research, you do all the work, and I think also now with how sophisticated customers are, spotting ads, feeling like they're being sold to, just purely down to the feed as well, just how many ads they're seeing on, like just on scrolling over lunch. So we have to understand that we don't want to just kind of stick to what everyone else is doing. Like, yeah, there's no reinventing the wheel, but like there has to be that opportunity to like take those bigger swings, figure out, okay, like how can we come at this from a different standpoint, and taking inspiration from organic, trying to tell stories. Those things I think are really, really important, because you kind of get stuck doing the same thing because it works, but then it works, and then when it doesn't work, that's then when it's like, oh, actually, we've not been doing anything new. We've not been trying to get anything new into the account. Then how do we go about doing that?
That's like kind of how we at Aplo, one thing that we really look at when it comes to creative development and how we make it is we kind of, there's 2 buckets essentially that we look at. We kind of have pipeline creative, that's kind of what we call it, and we have conceptual creative. In order to maintain a baseline within an ad account, especially as you start scaling spending more and more and whatnot, we always want to make sure we're producing a lot of kind of what we call pipeline creative, which is essentially variations of what is working, but still sticking close to what we know is going to work, because we want to make sure that we can maintain a baseline without just taking unnecessary risk. But at the same time, we're allocating resources and time, et cetera, towards what we call conceptual creative, which is kind of what you're talking about, where you're basically testing things that you don't necessarily have real data to support the fact that they're going to work. You might have, again, like you might be doing some social listening, and you might have some testimonials, and you might have reviews that are kind of informing it, but you've never really ran an ad in that format or angle, et cetera. So that's kind of what we call conceptual creative. And we kind of put like our foot on the gas and brake in both of those buckets based off performance, based off seasonality, et cetera. But to your point, we are still always looking at producing conceptual creative to ensure that we test different ideas, theories, and angles that then ultimately become winners and allow us to unlock more scale and kind of become pipeline creative over time as pipeline creative fizzles out. So very similar look on our end with that. And definitely in terms of that?
Yeah, it's such an important it is such an important thing to think about, and it's because you don't want to just consistently just doing big swings, because
Yeah.
it is like it kind of the way we look at it, kind of similar to you, is like when we're looking at it like a month, we're like, okay, like what are our iteration plays, and we're like, okay, like that is like what's working in the account, what are the what is the angle that's working, okay, how can we build on top of that whilst but not moving too far away from it, like is it just a new execution with a new creator but a very similar like key beats with the messaging and the way that it's formatted, and then angle test, like okay, how this is working, how do we like, okay, what is the newer angle that we want to be thinking about, let's kind of like dive into our research, and then like the big swings, which are like, there is really no understanding of this, how well this is going to work, but if it does work really well, and then that kind of that helps with the overall account, because it just gives you another format, or a format that you can work with as well.
Exactly.
So yeah, actually being creative, that's really the biggest thing, is that I think there's sometimes you kind of people can get stuck in like what's working, keep doing what's working, in terms of just like the same messaging over and over and over again, without doing anything else. And like that is really the biggest thing, isn't it? Is just that you have to come at it like it's called performance creative for a reason. Like it has to perform, yes, but it has to be creative. So what I always think about, and kind of what I speak to the team about, is like, how do we make the same benefit impossible to ignore? Like what are the ways that, like, what are they consuming on on their feed organically? How can we fit into the feed in a way that doesn't feel like they're being sold to, but we're hitting all of those important elements that they are like, oh wait, no, that's what I care about. That's what I want out of my life, or like that's how I want, whatever it is, that's, we want to be thinking about how we can kind of incorporate that into the creatives as well, because again, telling good stories that kind of invest people into it, but also making them in a way that they are native. So there's a couple examples I've just kind of I've put together of different brands and different kind of concepts, and then kind of a little, just like a summary of really what the idea was behind it. So for this one, for example, the concept was a travel vlog. This was based off of a new avatar that we'd unlocked in the account. We had an established, there were established avatars that we knew worked well, and we're like, okay, now we want to start, like, we're seeing travel recurring consistently in reviews. We haven't spoken to this customer yet, and we can see that the messaging around swollen ankles, after flights, like during flights, that is a big problem. Like people are talking about this a lot, and how much the product itself has benefited them. So I think, coming back to what you're talking about as well, in terms of the pipeline that you run creatively, is that we don't always start with like these big swings. This was actually built off of like 3 real concepts. Is the first one was, okay, we've got a creator that we're working with, let's get her to have a suitcase in some B-roll shots. She's doing another concept for us, but let's get these shots from her, because we know that this is going to help add a bit of context to us trying to dip our toe in the water around that travel angle itself. That then, okay, that gives us an opportunity to kind of at least start with hooks that are contextually relevant to this problem, versus just someone saying to a camera about having swollen ankles. Like actually just showing, having them walk into the shot with the suitcase. Having those shots is really useful, just to add that context. Validate and go, okay, are we seeing performance aligned within the account? Yes. Okay, great. Let's now take a next step where we have a creator that is solely recording like a concept purely based off of travel, but it's not a super high effort having to find a creator that's traveling at the right time to get them the product. So that was the kind of like the next step. And then the step after that, we're like, okay, this is working well. How do we then tell a story that keeps the product as the hero, but in a way that doesn't feel necessarily like it's as ad-like as well? So that was kind of like, okay, we need to work with the creator. They're going to be traveling. We want to match that environment. We want to have shots of them, in flight. We want them putting the socks on before their flight. Everything has to tell this person that's watching it that this is someone that's traveling, rather than like just someone is talking about traveling. It has that element of just that added element of authenticity as well. which I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
Next one, a minimalist wallet. So for this one, again, minimalist wallets, it is a market where it is, very, highest level of market sophistication out there. It's nothing new. Everybody's heard any claim that any wallet could make. So what we want to be thinking about is, how do we think about incorporating this into a real world or real life scenario? And one of the things with the wallet was that the other wallets that people have bought in the past that are similar in that minimalist wallet style, they have a limit to the number of cards that they can put in, just because of the structure of the actual wallet. Whereas this wallet itself is structured in a way that you can actually fit more cards in it, but it's still really easy to get them out. Whereas that is another problem that other people deal with other competitors. So like, okay, well, rather than us just telling somebody or telling people, hey, look, this is how many cards in, let's create a scenario where we have actors that are able to be authentic, because creators will make or break the creative. If you're looking to do something that's really authentic, like, you have to be really, really careful and cautious with like the types of people that you work with, because they will, like, if they don't come across authentic, it just makes it really, really difficult. If it's a very organic and kind of authentic style of concept. So this idea was like, just don't tell them it fits in, just prove it through real world behavior. So an element of comedy into it, arguing about there's no way, my cards are going to fit into that, and then showing it as well. So taking, okay, like, what is the core benefit here that we want to be speaking to, and also addressing objections that customers have all in one, but in a different packaged concept. Earplugs. This one, one of the things that with this product is, with this particular product line, is that the product itself is very much aligned with partners who have, I say partners, people who have partners that are snoring. Like, that is a big problem. And again, adding context, yes, we could have someone talking about the product itself, but also thinking about what is the ways that we can add more context so that it just feels a bit more real as well. So again, this couple, they're great actors. So like they do execute things really, really well. So let's have a concept where it's the middle of the night, partner snoring. Let's then introduce the product that way, and then showcase it in a way that feels a lot more like, hey, like, I've just decided to record this off the cuff whilst I'm just, while I'm about to go to sleep. The partner's fallen asleep already. I'm having to deal with the snoring. Hey, like, this is something that I use that I think is going to be beneficial to other people as well. So again, adding more context and thinking about what are the ways that we can include that benefit, but in a way that is not just someone, hey, like, just talking about it on camera, fixed.
More authentic,
This one, so one of the things we always like to do is think about how we can incorporate kind of organic concepts into the performance side of things. I think that's really, really important to think about. Is like, there's just so many different ideas, different trends that go on that I think are just great examples that if you have that kind of culture of creativity as a team, and you can like pull loads of like organic inspo and think about, okay, how do we incorporate this into the actual brand itself? Like, would this be a good opportunity? And we've done this for a couple of brands now, like this or that type of concept. A couple of things why. Like, one, there is an element of gamification. The customer itself kind of like wants to play along. It's like which one like would they choose? So they're kind of that also, I think sometimes as well, like, that creates a small micro agreement in like with that customer. So if they are kind of actively thinking about purchasing the product as well, I think that can work really well as well on top of it. But also, some products you don't need to kind of come from a place of like super sophistication of like overthinking it too much. Sometimes we're like, hey, like, what we want to do is we just want to show the best sellers, but we want to get the founder involved, and then he can choose which ones he likes. And we've done this with wallet, we've done it with like notebooks. It works well because it has that authenticity of the founder, but then it also has that element of gamification and feels very organic. as well. Like the leading up to the start of this video is very much like the scripting was like, what we want to do is like the direction here is start recording whilst you're walking up to whilst you're walking up to him, and speak to him whilst you're like before you've stopped, rather than just being fixed, just to kind of give that extra element of like, oh, this feels like they've just like decided just to quickly do this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, something organic in the feed. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that is again like the ways that you want to be thinking about incorporating, everything that we've spoken about, and taking all of these sentiments and then coming at it from that creative lens, I think is really, really important. So in summary, great ads aren't ideas. Like everyone can have ideas, but what they are is the outputs of a system. And that's the biggest thing is that because when we start with the format really doesn't matter to a point. Like, yes, it does. Like it does matter, but I would rather have a really like solid system where I can actively track back to, okay, this is the format. Okay, like this is the angle. Okay, cool. Like this is the hypothesis. This is the belief. Okay, well, let me just go back into the avatar doc and be like, right, okay, this is their belief. These are the supporting sentiments. Okay, so it's 20, 34, and this. Okay, cool. That's great. Let me go back into our the original sentiments and have a look at those. And it's a great way just to be able to kind of like double check your work more than anything. I think that's really the most important thing as well. And it all kind of comes together in terms of not wanting to just trust what AI is going to tell you as well. Like having these little gate checks with the numbers, I think is really good and useful just to help make sure that what it's telling you is right, so that you don't compromise your thought processes whilst utilizing AI.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think that was a ton of great information there, Oliver. I really appreciate you running through that. I think, again, like going back to what we talked about in the beginning, the input is so important. And I think spending more time on actually refining the input and the systems that you have, because like you think about, years and years ago, obviously the input was still very important, but if you had leverage on the output, you could potentially get ahead of people with just moderate input because you're just producing so much volume and so many iterations of that volume. But nowadays, especially like, because that piece is almost, in a sense, commoditized, where like the output of quantity is essentially, there's nothing limiting anybody from making 1,000 ads a day if they really wanted to, with all the tooling that you have out there. But ultimately, what it comes down to is like the input and the systems that are going into, and that's where you really get the alpha in all of this. So I think a lot of what you went through there is fantastic in that regard. Any final statements, Oliver? I want to give you a chance to also shout out Breakthrough Creatives if you want to dive into anything there. Anything else you'd like to add to the conversation?
I don't think in terms of anything else to add. I think it's one of those things where I think that with the system, it's also really brand dependent as well. I think that's really, really important. Is that thinking about like some brands, when we work with some brands, like we look at it and we go, does this require this level of sophistication from a process? And the answer is sometimes just no, like it doesn't need it. Sometimes it's like, okay, we don't need this level of sophistication right now. What we need to do is there's enough opportunity in the account that we can kind of come at it, and we can, from a speed standpoint, be able to get newer ideas into the account quicker. And building that pipeline. So it is one of those things where I say this with the teams, like we have to like, different brands at different levels require different approaches. A brand that is doing, maybe $1 million a year to like $5 million a year is a slightly different approach that brands maybe like 10 to 20 to 30 million a year. Plus then a brand that's doing like, 100, 200 million a year. Like the ways that you think about the creative strategy is just so different, because they most likely, some of them will have better internal systems as well already, but also it depends on the market that they're in and how sophisticated it is. And there's so many different things that there's no black and white in it. That's one of the biggest things as well, is that there is no like clear black and white how it needs to be approached, but it's at least having those systems in place so that if you need that system, and you're able to then at least be in a position where, like this is exactly the information that we have, and that is giving us the roadmap that we need to execute and help unlock that next level of growth as well.
100%. 100%. And I urge anyone that is watching the recording or that's just tuned into parts of it to definitely go check out the whole thing once it's live on YouTube. I think, again, a lot of really, really good stuff they went through, Oliver. But yeah, appreciate you hopping on, Oliver, and joining this edition of Ecom Weekly Live. And we'll definitely do one in the future. I think there's a lot more we can always dive into on the creative side and anything on the paid media side. So really enjoyed it. But yeah, that's basically a wrap on our end.
Good fun. Enjoyed it.